Any valid discussion of William Wordsworth should probably take into account his sister Dorothy. They were constant companions for quite a while, and really in his most productive years as an artist. They were. She was just 1 year younger than he was. They lived together for portions of their adulthood that were very significant, and she was in many ways an equal partner to Wordsworth and Coleridge in their project of lyrical ballads and their general reevaluation of the tools of poetry itself. She was not a poet, as we would define it, but she did keep very good journals. She kept a really quite remarkable diary that's a lot of fun to read, to go through as an example of it's an example of seeing the context and background for a lot of Coleridge and Wordsworth's work, but also just for an exploration of life at that time for these extraordinary people, these very perceptive, very intelligent people who are just going around and taking notes on the world that they see. And Dorothy Wordsworth is very charming for that. And you can see how her contributions really led to a lot of their work as you go through it. A lot of the same themes, a lot of the same imagery. It all comes up in this, and you realize that she wrote a lot of it first. She wrote it in prose, she wrote it in her diary, and then, Big Brother William and sometimes Coleridge can go back and rifle through it a little and say, oh yeah, that's what that was like. You know, I was wandering around and we stumbled on this. Now I have your assessment of what it is. Now it's you were an excellent note taker, but she was more than that. They could be a little bit ungenerous with the credit they give to her. William Wordsworth always loved his sister. There's no denying that. But women were not necessarily considered particularly significant in artistic terms. Take a look at in her diary in April of 1803, I think it is. She has this curious scene that is quite remarkable for its coincidence with one of Wordsworth's most famous poems. When we were in the woods beyond Gowbarrow Park, we saw a few daffodils close to the waterside. We fancied that the lake had floated the seeds ashore and that the little colony had so sprung up. But as we went along there were more and yet more, and at last under the boughs of the trees we saw that there was a long belt of them along the shore, about the breadth of a country turnpike road. I never saw a daffodil so beautiful. They grew among the mossy stones about and about them. Some rested their heads upon those stones as on a pillow for weariness, and the rest tossed and reeled and danced and seemed as if they verily laughed with the wind that blew upon them over the lake. They looked so gay, ever glancing, ever changing. The wind blew directly over the lake to them. There was here and there a little knot and a few stragglers and a few yards higher up, but they were so few as not to disturb the simplicity and unity and life of that one busy highway. We rested again and again. The bays were stormy, and we heard the waves at different distances in the middle of the water like the sea. And that's a beautiful little scene, and it's unremarkable in many ways, but it's quite remarkable for its acuity, for the attention it pays to nature, for the recognition that nature, and seeing it in abstract terms, talking about it as a highway where? Well, you travel through nature to get to perhaps divinity. This is sort of a core Romantic era transcendentalist belief. this simple flowing language. You get the sense of this is somebody for whom she's not struggling for words. She's not just trying to write down exactly what happened, but also give a sense of the feeling that it imbued in her. And that comes in very fluid, flowing, gentle, easy language. There are plenty of commas in here. These are long, lazy, summer-like sentences that just go on. But they're always gripping. It's always beautiful. And this is Dorothy Wordsworth's gift. And you can easily see, of course, Wordsworth's daffodils in it. Now, he took it and made it more of a mechanism for memory, which was his thing, so that was his contribution to it. She was writing about it presumably on the day of that walk, on the day of that experience. And he was coming, so she gives a first level perspective on the actuality of that field of flowers. And then he comes along, perhaps reads her notes and says, yeah, that was pretty good, because he didn't write his poem about that until a couple of years later. Not many years, but a couple. And so maybe he did go and reflect that. Now, very likely as well, it moved him in some way, and maybe he didn't really remember the specifics too well. He remembered the feeling, and his poem is all about remembering the feeling. So he was dealing with his material in his specific way. But there is that potential there that maybe he did check with his sister, or maybe they had a conversation about it later on. Maybe that night after dinner when they were saying, oh, what a beautiful walk we had. Or maybe over time more than that. Maybe he used her as a sounding board. They lived together, they could have lots of conversations. He was always very he was always very supportive of his sister in that way, and you can see how she functions as a kind of muse. Her sensibility, recorded first in her diary, in that immediacy that brings so much vivid detail. He can tap into that. That's his contribution. But that first layer that gives that Daffodils poem its grounding, its reality, maybe he is standing on the shoulders of the other artist in the family.